Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too.
I used to think winter was honest. That might sound strange, but growing up, winter always felt like the one season that couldn't lie. Everything was exposed, footprints told stories, breath hung in the air like proof you were still alive. Sound traveled farther, silence felt heavier. You knew where you stood. That belief didn't come from nowhere. I was born hard of hearing, not completely deaf, just enough that the world always felt slightly out of sync, like I was half a second behind everyone else. Conversations blurred if people turned away. Background noise swallowed words whole. I learned early to read faces, body language, pauses. You'd be surprised how much people say without realizing it. My parents drilled independence into me. Don't rely on strangers. Don't assume people will help. Always have an exit. By my 20s, that mindset was just muscle memory. A year ago, I was 31 and living alone in a quiet edge-of-town neighborhood outside Ashford Ridge, a small Midwestern suburb that backed straight into state-owned woodland, the kind of place where neighbors waved, where porch lights clicked on at dusk, where nothing ever really happened. That was why I chose it. After a messy breakup and a job transfer, I wanted calm. I wanted routine. I wanted to hear, or at least feel, my own thoughts. Winter helped with that. By February, the holidays had burned out, leaving behind empty calendars and half-melted decorations. Snow muffled everything. The forest behind my house turned into a white maze I'd come to know by heart. That's where Rook came in. Rook wasn't just my dog, he was my anchor. A thick-coated shepherd Malamute mix with a scar on his muzzle and eyes that missed nothing. I rescued him from a shelter 2 states away, and from day one, he treated me like his job. We walked every afternoon, not for fitness, not really, for sanity. That day started like every other. I finished a late lunch, leftover chili, lukewarm, and pulled on my boots. Outside, the air had that sharp winter bite that burns your lungs clean. The sky was pale, already thinking about dusk. February doesn't wait for anyone. Rook lost his mind the second we turned toward the trailhead. Yeah, I laughed, signing calm down, even though he didn't need it. His leash rattled like he might chew through it from excitement alone. The forest entrance sat at the end of my street, marked by a weathered wooden sign and a narrow path worn smooth by locals. I unclipped the leash once we were far enough in. Rook bolted ahead, kicking up powder, doubling back just to make sure I was still there. Fresh snow covered everything, clean, untouched, except for a few boot prints and yellow stains where other dogs had already claimed territory. Most people walked early before noon because the sun dipped fast this time of year. I didn't expect company. After about half an hour, we reached a fork. Left was familiar, right was quiet. The right path looked untouched, smooth like a blank page. I hesitated just long enough to feel that tiny thrill of doing something different. "All right," I muttered, "let's see." The trail curved deeper than the others, opening into a clearing I hadn't visited in months. That's where I stopped, pulled my binoculars from my pack, and scanned the tree line. Birdwatching wasn't really the goal. It was more about stillness, about listening in the way I could. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just shadow, then color. Blue, a tarp, half buried, strung between trees. A shape too deliberate to be natural. Something like a lean-to, low and tight against the wind. A shelter. My stomach tightened. Homeless camps weren't unheard of near state land, but this was close. Too close to residential trails. I told myself someone probably used it temporarily. Hunters, teenagers, nothing worth worrying about. Still, I didn't like how hidden it was. "Time to go, buddy," I whispered. Rook didn't come back right away. When he did, his posture was wrong. tail stiff, nose low, every muscle alert. That's when I noticed the footprints. They weren't mine, they were bigger, deeper. Long strides pressed hard into the snow, fresh enough that the edges hadn't softened. I turned my boot over, heart thudding, and compared them. Not even close. The trail hadn't forked again. Whoever made them had either passed me or been standing still. "Okay," I said under my breath. "You're fine. You just missed them." That explanation didn't comfort me, but it was logical enough to keep moving. The light faded fast. That's when Rook stopped. He planted himself and barked, not ahead, but behind me. I turned. The man was close enough that I could see frost clinging to his jacket. He was tall, taller than anyone I knew, broad shoulders under a white camouflage coat, charcoal snow pants blending into the trees. His hands stayed buried in his pockets. He didn't step forward. He didn't step back. He didn't step forward. He didn't step back. He just stood there. I felt stupidly rude for jumping, even though my heart was trying to escape my ribs. "Sorry," I said, raising my hand slightly. "Didn't hear you." His lips moved. I caught fragments. A soundless mumble. I couldn't tell if it was English or something else. "I'm hard of hearing," I said, tapping my ear, exaggerating the words. "It's getting dark. I'm heading out." He tilted his head. No nod, no wave, just watching. Rook growled low in his chest. I didn't wait for a response. The walk home felt longer than it should have. I locked every door out of habit, fed Rook, showered, and convinced myself the encounter was nothing more than awkward timing. People hike, people camp, people are weird. By midnight, the house was quiet. At 3:07 a.m., Rook woke me by licking my hand. I smiled sleepily and reached for my phone. That's when I saw the message. "Neighbor, hey, are you okay?" Rook's been barking like crazy. My smile vanished. Rook wasn't in the room. He was downstairs, barking. Not his warning bark, not his squirrel bark, the kind that comes from the chest, the kind that means someone is here. I moved slowly, heart pounding, and reached the stairs. The motion light outside snapped on, and there he was, standing in my backyard, close enough that I could see his breath. I didn't scream. I stepped back, locked myself in the bedroom, grabbed the machete I kept under the bed, not because I thought I'd use it, but because my hands needed something solid. I texted 911. My fingers shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. Rook planted himself between me and the door, hackles raised. A shadow passed under the door frame. Slow, deliberate, then nothing. Sirens came, lights flooded the yard. The man was gone. The patio glass was shattered. The gate to the forest stood open. The police searched, nodded, took notes. They never followed up. I fixed the door, stayed with a friend for a while. Now I only walk on roads. Winter still comes. But it doesn't feel honest anymore. It feels like it's waiting. I still remember the way the cold felt that morning, the kind of cold that sneaks through your jacket, no matter how many layers you wear. It was early December, the kind of Midwest winter where the sky stays gray even at noon, and everything feels quieter than it should. My name is Rowan Hale, and at the time, I was 16 years old. We lived on the outskirts of Briar Creek, Wisconsin, a small town where everyone waves even if they don't know your name, and the woods start just a few minutes past the last gas station. Our house sat at the end of a narrow road, surrounded by bare trees and frozen grass, the kind of place that feels peaceful until it doesn't. My younger sister Lennox was 15. She talked too much when she was nervous and chewed the sleeves of her hoodies without realizing it. I was the older one, the responsible one. At least, that's what my parents always said. Our dad worked seasonal contracts with a land management company. Some people called it conservation, others called it deforestation. All I knew was that he spent long days out in the woods, sometimes without cell service, sometimes coming home smelling like pine sap and gasoline. That Saturday started normal. Too normal. "Rowan, hurry up," Lennox yelled from the hallway. "If we miss the previews again, I swear." "I'm coming," I said, grabbing my keys. "You act like the previews matter." "They do," she shot back. "That's where you decide if a movie's gonna suck." We were going to see a horror movie, some new slasher with a Christmas theme, rated way above our age, obviously, but no one ever checked in Briar Creek, and we looked older than we were. Or at least, we thought we did. The theater was half full. The heat blasted too high, and the smell of popcorn stuck to my clothes. We'd just settled in when my phone buzzed. Loud. Too loud. Heads turned. Someone groaned. Lennox hissed, "Rowan, seriously." I didn't mean, I fumbled, standing up too fast, my foot catching on the sticky floor. I tripped. Laughter rippled through the row behind us. My face burned as we rushed out, the movie muffled behind the heavy doors. Outside, the cold slapped me awake. I checked my phone. Dad. A missed call. Then a text came through. "Hey, kiddo, any chance you could bring me lunch? The little cafe near the trailhead is closed today." I frowned. "That's weird." Lennox leaned over. "What? Dad usually packs his own food." She shrugged. "Maybe he forgot. You know how he is." I hesitated for half a second. Then I typed back, "Yeah. Where are you?" 3 dots appeared. "Down by Winter Hollow, by the lake. Come around the south path." Winter Hollow. The words didn't scare me then. That place was practically a landmark. Frozen lake, wooden deck, old warning signs half buried in snow. We'd been there 100 times. We went home, packed sandwiches and coffee, and took my car. The woods swallowed the road as soon as we turned off the highway. Snow clung to branches like bones. The sun sat low, already sinking. The sky bruised purple and orange. "Does it feel quiet?" Lennox asked. "It's winter," I said. "Everything's dead." She didn't laugh. We parked near the trailhead. No other cars, no footprints except ours. I called Dad, straight to voicemail. "Maybe there's no signal," Lennox said, but her voice shook. We walked. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The lake came into view, ice glazed over, deck stretching out like a rib cage. Someone sat at the edge. Black jacket, hood up, back to us. "There he is," I said, relief flooding my chest. "Dad?" Lennox called. No response. We stepped closer. "Dad," I said louder. Still nothing. Something crawled up my spine. I reached out and pulled back the hood. The face underneath wasn't my father's. The man smiled. Too wide, too eager. He stood, holding my dad's phone, waving it like a prize. Lennox screamed. "Why do you have that?" I yelled. "That's my dad's phone." He lunged, his hand clamped around Lennox's arm. She cried out, panic ripping through her voice. I shoved him with everything I had. He stumbled just enough. "Run!" I screamed. We ran. Branches tore at us. My lungs burned. Footsteps thundered behind us, too close. The car never looked so far away. We slammed inside, doors locked, tires screaming as I reversed. He crouched just before I hit the gas. I didn't look back. When we got home, Dad was already there. His phone had been stolen at work. Police came. They found the phone at the lake. No suspect. They told us we were safe. They were wrong. At 1:07 a.m., my phone lit up. Unknown number. Funny how your bedroom is the only light on. My blood turned to ice. Rustling outside my window. Second floor. I pulled the blinds. He was there, smiling, gun raised. Glass exploded. I screamed. We hid. Police came. Found an AirTag under my car. Months passed. They never caught him. But every winter night, when the woods go quiet, I still check my window. I still remember that winter like it's frozen somewhere behind my eyes, waiting for the quiet moments to creep back out. Back in 2021, everything felt heavier than usual. The world was still deep in COVID chaos. Time didn't mean much anymore, and days blurred together in that strange, claustrophobic way they only did during lockdown. If I had to sum up that day in one word, it would have been exhausting, mentally, physically, emotionally. The kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones. I'd been working from home for months by then, holed up in my small rental outside Hollow Creek, a quiet town in northern Pennsylvania, where winter always overstays its welcome. My job was one of those corporate gigs that pretends it respects work-life balance, but absolutely does not. That day, I'd been scheduled for a quick Zoom call in the afternoon before driving upstate to my parents' place in Briar Ridge to meet extended family for a small, safe gathering. That Zoom call was supposed to last 45 minutes. It ran nearly 3 hours. By the time I slammed my laptop shut, my jaw was tight from clenching it, my head was pounding, and my phone was blowing up with texts. "You still coming? Dinner's almost ready. You okay?" I checked the clock and muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." Everyone else had already arrived. I was still sitting there in sweatpants, staring at my reflection in a dark laptop screen. I rushed around the kitchen, threw on jeans and a hoodie, and poured myself 2 travel mugs of coffee. Strong, no sugar, no cream, just caffeine and desperation. "God help me," I muttered, snapping the lids on. The second I opened my front door, I knew this wasn't going to be a normal drive. Snow came at me sideways, sharp and aggressive, stinging my face like tiny needles. The wind howled through the trees lining my street, and the plows clearly hadn't been through in hours. The road looked less like pavement, and more like a suggestion of where pavement used to be. At least 2 feet of snow already covered the ground, and the forecast had warned it wouldn't let up until morning. My car, a beat-up ancient Hyundai Elantra that had no business being out in that kind of weather, sat buried halfway up its tires. No anti-lock brakes, no traction control, just vibes and a prayer. I brushed snow off the windshield, climbed in, and sighed. "Let's just survive tonight," I said aloud. I crawled through residential roads at under 25, white-knuckling the steering wheel while my wipers struggled to keep up. When I finally hit the highway, though, I made a bad decision, one I'd replay in my head 1,000 times afterward. I sped up, 70. I was always a fast driver, too confident, too comfortable behind the wheel. And for a while, it felt fine. The road was empty. The world felt suspended in snow and silence. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway around 9 p.m., my shoulders were aching from tension. My mom opened the door before I even knocked. "There you are," she said. "We thought you got buried somewhere." "Almost did," I replied, forcing a smile. Dinner was already halfway done, but nobody made a big deal out of it. We ate, drank, laughed, and for the first time all day, I felt human again. I had a couple beers, maybe one too many, and lost track of time swapping stories with cousins I hadn't seen in years. Before I knew it, coats were going on and hugs were happening. I checked my phone, 12:17 a.m. "Damn it," I whispered. Another foot of snow had fallen while we'd been inside. I told myself I was sober enough, not proud of that decision, just honest. I was tired. I wanted my own bed. That was it. "Text me when you get home," my mom said. "I will," I promised. The roads were completely dead. No tire tracks, no headlights, just endless white swallowing everything. As I headed toward the highway, I turned down a long, wooded stretch locals called Old Quarry Road, a shortcut I'd taken dozens of times. That's where everything went wrong. I pushed it up to about 40, thinking I had control. Then the curve came. The back end of my car slid out like it had a mind of its own. Okay, I said, trying to stay calm. I steered into the skid. Downshifted. Nothing worked. The car didn't slow. It didn't turn. It just kept going, straight. I remember the impact more as a sound than a feeling. A violent crunch followed by the explosive pop of the airbag. The world went white, then silent. When I came to, snow was drifting through the cracked hood. My chest burned. My ears rang. "I'm alive," I whispered. "I'm alive." The car was wrecked, buried nose first into a tree, completely immobile. I called roadside assistance. 40 minutes, they said, maybe longer. No houses, no street lights, just forest in every direction. I called my dad. "I'm coming," he said immediately. "Stay in the car." I hung up and waited. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, crunching slowly through snow. I leaned forward, heart pounding. The sound stopped. Then came something worse, a wet dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the ground. I stepped out of the car and called, "Hello?" Nothing. I saw movement near the tree line, tall, hunched, wrong. I got back in and locked the doors. Less than a minute later, something struck my passenger window. Thud. I stepped out again, panic setting in. Boot prints circled my car. Blood dotted the snow. I grabbed my handgun and followed the trail into the woods, breath fog in the air. That's where I found the deer, or what was left of it. Its body torn open, head gone. When I returned to my car, the deer's severed head sat in my driver's seat, eyes glassy, mouth frozen open like it was screaming. I don't remember running. I just remember headlights. My dad. When we returned, everything was gone. The head, the body. Only blood and drag marks remained. Even now, I don't know who or what was out there that night. And sometimes, when the wind is right, I swear I can still hear footsteps crunching through the snow. I used to think nothing bad could ever happen to me inside my own house. That belief didn't come from arrogance. It came from routine. I was 26 at the time, living alone in a quiet development just outside Maple Ridge, Pennsylvania. The kind of place where every house looks slightly different, but somehow exactly the same. Vinyl siding, two-car garages, small porches nobody ever actually sits on. People waved when they drove by. Kids rode bikes in the summer. During winter, everything went silent. I worked as a data compliance analyst for a healthcare software company based in Chicago. COVID changed everything, obviously. By late 2022, we'd settled into this half-remote system where no one really tracked hours as long as deadlines were hit. That freedom felt earned. I'd stack my remote days, sleep late, work nights. Nobody cared. My manager, Russ Calder, literally told me once over Slack, "Just don't miss deliverables and we're good." So that December, a few days before Christmas, when a lake-effect winter storm was forecasted to hammer western Pennsylvania, I decided to stay home the entire week. No commuting, no office small talk. Just me, my laptop, coffee, and snow. Backstory that matters. I should explain something up front. I wasn't a paranoid person. I grew up in rural Ohio. My dad left doors unlocked. My mom believed bad people don't just wander into good homes. That mindset stuck with me. Even after moving out on my own, I never installed a security system. I didn't own a gun. I barely even locked the garage door. Why would I? Nothing ever happened until it did. That Wednesday, I woke up around 11:30 a.m., later than usual. The sky outside already looked wrong, flat gray, heavy, like it was pressing down on the neighborhood. I remember muttering, "Yeah, this storm's gonna be nasty." I brewed coffee, threw on sweatpants and a hoodie, and opened my laptop at the kitchen counter. By noon, snow was already dusting the ground. By 1, it was sticking, thick flakes, quiet ones, the kind that swallow sound. Work was slow. I answered emails, ran reports, had a short Zoom call where everyone joked about snow days like we were still kids. Around 3:45 p.m., it got dark. Not sunset dark, storm dark. The streetlights clicked on early, their orange glow barely cutting through the snowfall. Wind slammed against the side of the house hard enough to make the windows vibrate. I moved to my upstairs office, the smallest bedroom overlooking the side yard. I liked working there because I could watch the weather roll in. At 6:10 p.m., my stomach growled. I checked DoorDash. Everything nearby was either closed or showing insane delivery times. Not worth it, I said to nobody. I heated leftover chili and went back upstairs. That's when I saw the light. It wasn't bright, just a thin, white beam moving across the snow outside my side window. At first, I thought it was a reflection, maybe headlights. Then it moved upward, slow, controlled. I rolled my chair back and leaned closer to the glass. "That's a flashlight," I whispered. It swept the side of my house, paused near the foundation, then flicked off. I stood up, heart thumping, not racing yet, just alert. Who the hell was outside? I cracked the window shade just enough to peek out, pressing my forehead against the cold glass. Snow blurred everything. Visibility was garbage. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds before logic kicked in. Probably a neighbor, I told myself. Storm knocked something loose. Maybe someone's looking for a dog. Still, I locked the front door. That should have been enough. The next 2 hours passed weirdly. The storm intensified. Wind howled through the trees behind my house. The structure creaked and groaned like it was breathing. Every now and then, I'd pause typing, convinced I heard something else. A knock, a scrape, a bump that felt too deliberate. But every time, silence followed. "Old houses make noise," I muttered. At 8:47 p.m., there was a sound that didn't fit. A hard, sharp thud. Not outside, inside, downstairs. It sounded like wood splitting. I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. "Hello?" I called out, immediately feeling stupid. No answer. I grabbed my phone and walked into the hallway. Everything looked normal. I crept down the stairs, each step loud in the quiet. The living room was untouched. Kitchen fine. Back door locked. I stood there listening, the storm roaring outside. Get a grip, I told myself. I turned to head back upstairs. That's when the power cut. Click. Total darkness. Not even emergency lighting. The storm swallowed everything. I froze halfway up the stairs. "Nope," I whispered. Power outages weren't unusual during storms, but the timing felt wrong. Too perfect. I pulled out my phone. No signal. The screen light barely illuminated my hands. I remembered the breaker box was in the basement. Just flip it and get back upstairs. I moved slowly, feeling the wall, counting steps. Then I heard movement. Low, heavy, muffled. From behind the basement door. My blood turned ice cold. The sound got closer. The basement door creaked open. I didn't breathe. I stepped backward and slipped into the downstairs bathroom, leaving the door cracked open. Footsteps entered the hallway. Slow, confident, not searching, walking like they knew exactly where they were. I pressed my hand over my mouth. The footsteps passed inches from me. I could smell them. Cold air, wet fabric, something metallic. They didn't stop. They went to the stairs. And then, nothing. Carpet. Silence. I waited 5 seconds. 10. Then I ran. I slammed into walls, knocked over a chair. Didn't care. I grabbed my keys from the garage hook and burst out the side door into the storm. Snow blasted my face. I dove into my car, locked the doors, and started it with shaking hands. As I drove, I used the emergency assist button. My voice cracked when I spoke. "There's someone in my house." Police arrived 20 minutes later. The house was empty. The breaker had been flipped manually. The officer looked at me and said quietly, "Whoever this was, they weren't stealing. They went straight upstairs, to my office, to my bedroom. They knew I was home." I moved 2 weeks later. I don't work late anymore. And when winter storms hit, I don't watch the snow. I close the blinds. I still remember the exact feeling that morning. The kind you get when you wake up before your alarm, already half stressed about the road ahead. It was late December, a few days before Christmas, and the sky outside my apartment in Brookdale, Minnesota was that dull, frozen gray that usually means snow later. Not now. I'd packed the night before. One duffel bag, some gifts shoved into a grocery tote, and my laptop because work might need me. Even though my sister promised the Wi-Fi at her place in Westfall, Montana was spotty at best. I hadn't seen her in over a year, and honestly, the trip was as much about escaping the city as it was about family. I told myself it'd be simple. One long drive, podcast queued up, caffeine doing its thing, and I'd be there by Friday night. No big deal. That's what I thought. My car, an old dented Subaru Outback with almost 200,000 miles, started without complaint. The heater worked, the tires were decent, and I trusted it more than most people. I grabbed a burnt coffee from a speedway on the edge of town, took one look at the weather app, and shrugged. Snow later, not now. The first few hours were easy. Flat roads, light traffic, cornfields buried under old snow. The radio faded in and out, switching between static and some local talk show arguing about the Vikings. I crossed into North Dakota by early afternoon, stopping once for gas and another coffee that tasted worse than the first. By the time the sun started dipping, that's when things changed. It began as a few lazy flakes drifting across the windshield. Nothing scary, just winter doing winter stuff. But within 30 minutes, it thickened. The flakes came faster, sharper, slanting sideways like the wind was angry about something. The sky went dark earlier than it should have, swallowed by low clouds that pressed down on the highway. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Visibility dropped fast. My headlights barely cut through what felt like a moving wall of white. The road markings disappeared, and I started following tire tracks instead of lanes. No cars ahead of me, none behind. Just endless snow and trees creeping closer to the road. I muttered to myself, okay, this is getting sketchy. The GPS signal flickered. 1 bar, then nothing. That's when I decided I wasn't pushing it. I told myself I'd pull into the next place I saw. Didn't matter what it was, gas station, motel, diner, anything with lights and walls. I wasn't about to end up in a ditch in the middle of nowhere with no signal. About 15 minutes later, just when my nerves were shot, I saw a glow through the snow. Warm yellow light bleeding out of the darkness on the right side of the road. I slowed down, squinting hard. By the time I realized what it was, I was already turning in. The parking lot was small, uneven, and half buried. 3 cars sat there. One of them was almost completely swallowed by snow, like it had been there for days. The other 2 looked newer, snow barely dusting their roofs. I parked near the entrance and killed the engine. The building was a roadside cafe, old school, the kind you don't see much anymore. Wooden siding, neon open sign flickering like it was tired. A hand-painted sign above the door read, Pine Ridge Cafe, no motel, no gas pumps, just food and shelter. Good enough, I said out loud. The moment I stepped out, the cold slapped me hard. Wind cut through my jacket like it wasn't even there. Snow stung my face as I trudged toward the door, boots crunching loud in the silence. Inside was warm, too warm. The door shut behind me with a heavy thud, and suddenly everything felt still. The cafe was small, maybe 6 booths total, a short bar up front with 3 stools. Christmas lights hung unevenly along the window, half of them burnt out. An old coffee pot steamed behind the counter. 3 people were inside. 2 men sat at the bar. A woman stood behind the counter wiping a mug. No one was talking. All 3 of them looked at me at the exact same time. Then, almost in unison, "Evening." Their voices overlapped just enough to make my skin prickle. Hey," I replied, pulling my gloves off. "Crazy weather out there." The woman nodded. You ain't kidding. Her name tag read Linda. She was probably mid-40s, hair pulled back tight, tired eyes, but not unfriendly. I took a seat on the empty stool next to the men. One of them was younger, late 30s maybe, broad shoulders, red flannel jacket. He gave me a quick nod. The other one made me uncomfortable immediately. He was older, early 50s maybe, thin, pale. His skin looked almost gray, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. His eyes were sunken, red around the edges, and he stared into his coffee like it had personally offended him. He didn't look drunk. He looked empty. What can I get you, hun? Linda asked. Just coffee, I said. Black. She poured it without another word. I moved to a booth by the front window, mostly to keep an eye on my car. Snow was already piling up fast. For a while, things felt normal enough. The younger guy, Caleb, I later learned, mentioned he was trying to beat the storm to his cabin a few miles out. The older guy didn't say a word. Every time I glanced over, I felt that same tight feeling in my chest. Something about him was wrong. After a few minutes, the cafe went quiet again. Not awkward quiet, heavy quiet, like everyone was holding their breath. I cleared my throat. Roads look real bad. Caleb nodded. State don't plow this stretch much. You're smart for stopping. The older man didn't react. After a bit, Caleb stood. I'm gonna try my luck before it gets worse. Linda frowned. You sure? Yeah, cabin's close. He pulled his coat on and headed out. A minute passed. Then the older man stood too. No goodbye, no eye contact, just walked out. That's when my unease really kicked in. I waited, sipped my coffee, talked with Linda about the storm, about how business was slow this time of year. She said folks usually avoided the highway in winter. 30 minutes went by. No one else came in. I looked out the window again. Both cars were still there. Empty. My stomach dropped. I walked to the door and cracked it open. Wind howled. Snow whipped sideways. No footprints leading away, just drifts already filling in. I hurried back to my car, heart pounding. The key turned. Nothing, no click, no struggle. Dead. That's when I saw him, a shape moving behind the cafe. Coming out of the trees, walking toward me. I didn't think. I ran, locked the cafe door. Linda stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Call 911, I said. Now. She hesitated, but she did it. Seconds later, the man was at the door. He stared at me through the glass. His eyes weren't empty anymore. They were alive and angry. He banged once, hard. Then he ran. The police arrived an hour later. They found Caleb's body in the woods. My ignition line had been cut. So had his. The man was never found. I made it to my sister's place the next day. I don't drive long distances in winter anymore, and sometimes when the snow comes down hard and the world goes quiet, I still see that man walking out of the trees. I still remember that winter like it hasn't really ended for me. Some memories don't fade. They just get buried under time, like roads under snow. Still there, waiting. Last year, Christmas break had pulled me back to my hometown, a forgotten speck on the map in northern Pennsylvania. One of those places where people either never leave or leave as soon as they can. I was home from college, sleeping in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by old trophies, peeling posters, and the constant reminder that adulthood doesn't pause just because it's the holidays. Bills don't care about Christmas. Rent doesn't care about family dinners. So when I wasn't helping my mom shovel the driveway or pretending to enjoy awkward reunions, I was door dashing. Snow nights were usually gold. That night, the snow wasn't aggressive, just enough to coat the roads, soften the trees, and convince most sane people to stay inside. The kind of night where the town goes quiet, but the app keeps pinging. Hot food, cold air, decent tips. I remember glancing at the clock on my dash, 9:47 p.m. All right, I muttered, rubbing my hands together. One more hour. Orders had slowed but not stopped. Then one came through. Pickup was normal. Drop off, a little far, about 20 minutes out. The payout was good enough that I didn't question it. My hometown was small but spread thin. Houses tucked deep into woods, long gravel drives, no neighbors for miles. I accepted. As I drove, snow tapped against my windshield like fingernails. The radio faded in and out, local country stations struggling to reach this far. By the time I turned off the main road, I realized I hadn't seen another car in 10 minutes. The GPS voice chirped calmly, like nothing was wrong. In 500 feet, your destination will be on the right. But when I got there, my stomach tightened. There was no house, just trees. The road narrowed into what looked like a driveway once upon a time, now completely swallowed by snow. No tire tracks, no lights, no mailbox, just a dark mouth leading into the woods. I sat there with the engine running, breath fogging the glass. "Yeah, no," I whispered. I checked the address again. Same pin, same spot. I called the customer. He picked up immediately. "Yeah?" His voice was deep, rough, like he'd been smoking since middle school. "Hey, this is your DoorDash driver. I'm at the location, but I'm not seeing a clear driveway or a house." A pause, then a short laugh. "It's there," he said. "Snow covers it." "Well, yeah, I figured, but it's not plowed at all. I don't really feel safe driving my car through that." Another pause, longer this time. "That's why I ordered delivery," he said. "If I wanted to walk, I'd get it myself." His tone shifted, sharp, annoyed. "If you're not gonna bring it, what's the point?" I clenched my jaw. DoorDash rules ran through my head, but I didn't know them well back then. All I knew was ratings mattered, cancels mattered, gas mattered. "Okay," I said quietly. I hung up and just sat there for a second. The woods felt closer now. I grabbed the food, locked my car, and stepped into the snow. It wasn't deep, but uneven. Every step crunched loud enough to make me wince. The driveway was more of a suggestion. Slightly thinner trees, slightly darker path. I kept my phone flashlight on, but it barely cut through the darkness. Snowflakes glittered, then vanished. I kept glancing back at my car. Its headlights were the only real light I had, and with every step forward, they shrank. "Should have trusted your gut, idiot," I muttered. That's when I heard it. A crunch, not mine, off to my left. I froze. The sound was distant but unmistakable, snow compressing under weight. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting it. Silence. I swept my flashlight toward the sound. Trees, shadows, nothing else. Maybe a deer, I told myself. People always said that. I kept walking. Minutes passed, but there was still no house, no porch, no light, just trees and more trees. The cold started to bite through my jacket. My breath came quicker. My mind started catching up to my fear. What if there isn't a house? The thought hit me hard enough that I stopped walking. Standing there, alone, it finally clicked how wrong everything felt. No plowed drive, no lights, no landmarks, just a pin on a map. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and called the customer again. It rang once, twice. That's when I saw it. A light, deep in the trees, off to my right, faint, yellow. Hope flared for half a second. Then the light shut off. The call dropped at the same moment. No signal. Something inside me snapped. "Nope," I whispered. I turned and ran. Snow flew up as my boots slipped. My lungs burned. The sound of my own footsteps was deafening, drowning out everything else. I didn't look back. I didn't want to know. When my car finally came into view, relief flooded me until I got closer. Something was wrong. The car leaned. My heart sank. One tire was completely flat, slashed. "Are you kidding me?" My voice cracked. I threw the food on the ground, yanked the door open, and climbed in. The car struggled, but it moved. The rims scraped as I pulled back onto the road, adrenaline overriding everything. As I drove away, I finally called 911. They asked questions, took notes, sounded bored. No evidence of a suspect? One of them said later. Probably just vandals. I knew better. Someone wanted me off that road. Someone wanted me walking deeper. I never door dashed at night again. Sometimes when winter comes back around, I still think about that light in the woods, and I wonder, if I had kept walking, would I have ever walked back? I remember the first winter I realized silence could feel heavy. I was 16, standing on my parents' back porch in Ashwood Falls, a nothing town tucked between cornfields and frozen creeks somewhere in the upper Midwest. The kind of place where people waved even if they didn't know your name, where winters dragged on like a bad habit, and where everyone believed nothing truly strange ever happened. That belief didn't survive the winter I'm about to talk about. I'm writing this now because people keep asking why I don't go near frozen lakes anymore, why I flinch when I hear ice crack under my boots, why I stopped loving winter altogether. I never give them the full answer. I just say, you wouldn't get it unless you were there. So here it is, the whole thing. No bullshit, no exaggeration. I was home from college for winter break, crashing in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by trophies I didn't care about and posters I hadn't taken down, because it felt wrong to admit I wasn't that kid anymore. College had drained my savings faster than I expected, so when I wasn't stuck at family dinners or pretending to enjoy small talk with relatives, I picked up delivery shifts to keep my head above water. That's how winters were in Ashwood Falls. You stayed busy, or the cold got inside your head. The tradition started years earlier, back when life felt simpler. Every winter, once the lakes froze solid, my friends and I would drive out to Miller's Lake, a few towns over. Not a party, not a stunt, just us, the ice, and the quiet. People always thought that part was weird. But if you've ever stood in the middle of a frozen lake at night, snow drifting down, no wind, no traffic, no voices, then you know, the world feels paused, like you stepped somewhere you weren't supposed to be. That winter, it was me, Logan, Trevor, and Ben. Logan was the driver, beat-up Chevy pickup, rust eating the wheel wells, but it ran like a champ in snow. Trevor never shut up, always cracking jokes even when it wasn't the time. Ben was quieter, sharper, the kind of guy who noticed things before anyone else did. It was late December. Snow had been falling steady all evening. Not a blizzard, just enough to muffle sound. The temperature hadn't climbed above freezing in weeks. We told ourselves the ice was solid. That was the first lie of the night. Logan flicked on the high beams as we pulled into the gravel lot near the tree line. Dead out here, Trevor muttered, pulling his hood tight. Feels like a horror movie already. Relax, Logan said. Ain't nobody dumb enough to be out here this late. Ben didn't say anything. He just stared out into the dark. The walk to the lake was quiet, except for the crunch of snow under our boots. Trevor and Logan lit cigarettes, the orange glow flashing briefly in the dark like fireflies. I remember thinking how bright they looked against all that white. The lake was a sheet of pale blue, glowing under a nearly full moon. Snowflakes drifted lazily, catching the light. It was beautiful in a way that hurt. Logan grabbed a rock and tossed it onto the ice. Thud, no cracks, no echoes. See, he said, solid. We stepped out, slow at first, then more confident. Maybe 100 feet from shore, just far enough to feel like we were floating in the middle of nowhere. That's when Ben stopped. Hold up, he said quietly. What? Trevor asked. Ben pointed. Across the lake, near the trees, something was moving. At first, my brain refused to process it. A dark shape, hunched low, dragging something behind it. A bear, Trevor whispered. No way, Logan said, though his voice didn't sound convinced. It moved wrong, too slow, too deliberate, and then it stood up, too tall. too straight. What the hell? I breathed. As it got closer, the snow cleared just enough for us to see it clearly. It was a man wearing a bear suit, a full-body costume, matted and dark, the head oversized and crooked. A rope trailed from his hand, pulling a small black bag behind him across the ice. Nobody spoke. The air felt thick, like the cold had weight. The man reached a spot maybe 60 feet away, stopped, and calmly unzipped the suit. Stepped out of it like it was nothing, just another jacket. He knelt down, picked up a rock, and started slamming it into the ice. Crack, crack, crack. Each hit echoed across the lake. Ben grabbed my sleeve. "We need to go, now." We turned, moving fast but careful, boots slipping. My heart was pounding so loud I swore he could hear it. Then, "Hey!" The shout cut through the night. I ran. I didn't look back. Didn't care if I slipped. Didn't care if the ice cracked. My lungs burned, throat raw from cold air. We hit solid ground and didn't stop until we reached the truck. Logan peeled out of the lot, gravel spraying. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Trevor whispered, "That wasn't trash." Ben nodded. And that bag was too small to be nothing. We never went back to Miller's Lake. Months later, a missing child report aired on the local news. The timeline matched. We told the police everything. I don't know what was in that bag. I don't know if they ever found it. But every winter, when the snow starts falling and the world goes quiet, I remember the sound of ice cracking under a stranger's hands. And I know some things are buried where they were never meant to be found.